We started out in a room at the back of Holborn West Church. And the original idea really was to help unemployed teenagers.
The original room no longer exists because we had some refurbishment done after Neighbour moved out. The room they met in, which would have been our old session house, would have run approximately from this area, further up the corridor, to approximately here. It's hard to remember now, just the exact dimensions, but it wasn't a large room, and it obviously instantly wasn't very large then either.
I'm Mike Mayer. In 1984 I was the minister of Holborn West Church in Aberdeen. It's set in Great Western Road, one of the richer parts of the city. I've always been a very political person, and with the second election victory of Margaret Thatcher, I decided that we all ought to be doing something to deal with the kind of poverty that was being created partly by government policies. And so through the Presbytery of Aberdeen, the body that oversees the Church of Scotland in Aberdeen, I put forward a proposal that we start a project which would employ young unemployed people and would use them to help the most vulnerable and elderly people in the city. The name Instant Neighbour came from a number of sources. First of all, that we realised that many people in modern society no longer had the same kind of immediate relationship with a neighbour that they used to have in times past, and that many people couldn't ask a neighbour for very practical kinds of help. I can't change this light bulb, my door doesn't open, the washing machine's overflowed, my drain is blocked, and so on. And so we realised that people maybe needed an outside neighbour, and somebody who'd come quickly if asked, so an instant neighbour. But then that also chimed in with things we knew about society. So in modern society everything's instant, so instant news, instant food, instant pleasure, instant all kinds of things. And so Instant Neighbour had that buzz about it. It meant that young people who were being invited to work in this project could feel they were doing something important that had a bit of zap.
We were very much reliant in the early days on people from the church, both for time and for money. And one day I took a funeral of a man who had been killed on the road between Aberdeen and Ballater. He was a man who lived in Ballater, and his wife asked me to take his funeral, which I did. And when I went back to see her afterwards, she had been reading about Instant Neighbour, and she gave me an envelope and said that was for Instant Neighbour. And when I got home from Ballater, I didn't open it till I got home, and here was a cheque for £3,000, which in these days was the difference between night and day, life and death kind of thing, or existing and not existing. And that was one example I distinctly remember of that kind of generosity we've experienced over the years. One of the strengths of the organisation, I think, has always been the philosophy we've had about how we deal with people. A lot of people who are at the bottom end of the social economic scale don't get treated well, and they probably haven't been treated well all their life. They've probably not done very well at school, they've probably been unhappy at home, many of them. And one of the things we've always majored on, if you like, is treating people with dignity and treating people kindly. We don't judge people, we don't condemn people, we accept people as they are and listen to their story and try and help them to move on.
Many people, I think, would be puzzled as to why Instant Neighbour started through the church. But the church was a good place to start it because it has a social conscience, it has many ready volunteers and people of goodwill. And so right at the start, we wouldn't have had premises if it hadn't been for the church offering free accommodation for the very young Instant Neighbour, and providing that, although that was difficult on both sides, because church people weren't used to young unemployed people trampling all over the place and being young and sparky, and they weren't used to church people being conservative and quiet, and so there was quite a mixture, but it worked well. And over the years, the successive management committees of Instant Neighbour, they were composed largely of people who'd come through the churches, were dedicated, they were patient, they were dutiful, they always did their job, and they were learning all the time about the social problems that Instant Neighbour faced.
Obviously the financial circumstances of Instant Neighbour at the beginning was stable but very small amounts of money. As the project grew and the needs and the demands on the project grew, the funding problem became huge, and we really had to come up with some big ideas to raise big money, and it was something I actually didn't know that I had the ability to do it. And again, it was being pushed by support from the churches, support from the business community, and we had to raise vast sums of money. It then became clear that, you know, you work with Instant Neighbour 5 days a week, but it becomes 7 days a week, because you did all your fundraising in the weekends, and the churches were very heavily involved, and the business community. So it just mushroomed and it grew, and as it grew, the funding problems grew because it come bigger. You needed more money. It wasn't that I was sitting in an office with a crystal ball and saying, oh, we're going to do this. No, this would be a good idea. How the charity developed was the needs that was put on it. And the charity was dragged along the road of the needs that was being put on it by the people who were coming through the door. And these needs were so complex, but there was so many different types of needs, because obviously you had young people who were not getting benefit, you had families with children, you had the cutbacks on funding for the basic things in life, and then the whole thing about homelessness, people, you know, being allocated flats with no furniture, sleeping on the floor on a mattress. I mean, all that sort of thing had changed now, because Instant Neighbour come up with the idea about supportive packages for people moving into their first time flat with a package, i.e. the basics, washing machine, a bed, a table, etc., and a little bit of support.
The Safe and Sound project run by Instant Neighbour, when I was there, what I remember about it was a service that we would provide for parents who needed a little bit extra help with safety equipment, as in fire guards and cooker guards, and also we would provide baby food, we would provide nappies and children's clothes and shoes. So these were things that were donated to the charity, that we would make sure were clean, and we would unopen the bags and pack everything into age groups and whether it was boy or girl and that, so that when somebody came in looking for some help, we could just go and fill a bag of things for them and help them out.
The idea of Safe and Sound, where young children, about accidents, kids falling downstairs. We went to the health board about that, and this surgeon there thought it was absolutely fantastic. He looked at the long term, the amount of children that were reduced to accidents coming through, i.e. falling downstairs, scalds, burns, nipped fingers, etc., by helping families with the basic needs. And when we moved out of the church premises and moved to the little wee offices in the Gallagher, that was the biggest turning point. Then the whole focus of Instant Neighbour changed within a month. We were dealing with bigger issues, bigger problems, and bigger amounts and bigger quantity of people. And again, that was then the stepping stone for moving into the building in Portlaneuk Road. And obviously when we identified that building, it was lying empty for, 10 years. I approached the City Council. I said to them, I would do the building up, I would find the money, but they had to give me the building for £1. Some people looked at me and laughed, but I persisted. I pushed it, I pursued the politicians and blackmailed them into it, because it's poverty, and you know, I wasn't asking any money from them. So they agreed to give us the building for 100 years for £1 lease. And then I walked out of the meeting and think, where am I getting £500,000 from to do the building up? It was actually 480,000, I believe. Anyway, we found the money. Got money from the lottery, got money from London, got money from... But most of the money and the materials come from the people of Aberdeen. They give it there. And we opened Point Out Road.
In middle of 2014 opened a retail unit in Union Square, which is called Home Comforts, which has allowed us to sell more high quality goods at very reasonable cost, and has provided employment opportunities for 3 people who were long-term unemployed, and has allowed us to offer more volunteering opportunities to different people from different groups. Which is great actually, so that's been a very positive move for us as an organisation. We're able to help more people and offer more skills development side of stuff through the development in Union Square, which is wonderful. It's interesting, the overarching aim of Instant Neighbour, which has been alleviating poverty, has never changed throughout its history. We have tried to do that in different ways and have introduced different projects, but in the recent past have remained I would say in the recent past, about the past 4 or 5 years, have kept to our core principles, which is around about setting up and maintaining a home. So all of the projects we're trying to deliver and develop around about that are aimed at helping people do that. People that become homeless, there is an automatic assumption that they have done something wrong, that they are addicted to some substance, alcohol, drugs, that kind of stuff. And while some people are, not everybody is. Majority of people have less than 3 months worth of savings in any bank account. So if they were made redundant tomorrow, could perhaps pay their mortgage for the next 3 months, and then are starting to face the prospects of homelessness themselves. So it can happen very quickly and very easily without any sort of real planning. And I think there's a mistake made about judging people who are homeless. The majority of people that come to us, again on the food bank side of stuff, are not homeless, but they are having to make stark choices to pay their rent, pay for gas and electricity, or buy food. And that is in part because they're on low income, some of them, but also because some of them are not earning. And the benefit system as it currently is run doesn't work properly. It is in the process of being reformed, and what they're doing with the reform at the moment is punitive. People get sanctioned very quickly for fairly minor things, and then have to struggle or wait and appeal their sanction before they get any money. We have an example currently with an Instant Neighbour of a young man who is in his early 20s, who is a father. He has quite severe mental health issues because of his own life, and it wasn't a life he chose himself. He was put into care by his mother at the age of 5. He then went through 2 or 3 different foster families, was quite severely abused within 2 of those. He was removed from a foster home that he'd been in for 3 years overnight because the foster family decided they couldn't cope with him. He was then put into a residential home for boys, which was, from what I understand, a fairly brutal place with virtually no love or care. He's never felt loved or cared for. He was removed from that by his father at the age of 15. His father was an alcoholic, and his father exposed this young man to a lifestyle which actually at the age of 15 you should never have been exposed to. Sexual encounters with older women, drug taking, alcohol taking, that kind of stuff. When his son was born, he had an anxiety attack so severe that he was terrified of handling his son in case he dropped him because he got dizzy. He felt that he couldn't understand or cope with being a parent because of his own experience. he has the system as it is at the moment in terms of getting benefits. You're only allowed to be off work or unable to sign on 3 times in a year because of illness, and then you lose your benefits. We're in March of 2015 and he's now been off his work and not been able to sign on for his benefits for 3 times, so he has been sanctioned. This young man has severe mental health issues. In order for him to get any assistance now, he has to appeal his sanction. That can take 5 to 6 weeks for that appeal to be heard. And in the meantime, he has no access to any money. And I do not understand why that is considered to be socially just. Most people will be aware that in the recent past there have been lots of press reporting about numbers of people going to food banks. And I would say that the food bank, for instance, Neighbour has trebled in numbers coming to it in the last 3 years. In 2012 we gave out just over 1,300 food parcels, and in 2014 we gave out 3,640. So you can see that the numbers have grown exponentially in that period of time, which causes us with a bit of a challenge, to be honest with you, in terms of how we manage 2 things: to get enough food and then basically how to get it out to people.
This is our food bank area, and this is where we collect all the donations of food that people have kindly donated to us. We make up the food parcels like so, and the food parcels are enough for 1 person and last for about 3 days. The food that we have is non-perishable goods, so lots of pastas, lots of tins of food. There's the demand for food parcels, unfortunately, has been on the rise recently. Contrary to what might be popular belief, it is not just people who are unemployed or who are homeless. More and more there are people coming to us who are in employment but are just unable to make ends meet. So I've never worked in the third sector before, and I have to say that I thoroughly enjoy it. It's hugely rewarding, and it's a complete and utter eye-opener. I think that Aberdeen is, I think probably poverty, not just food poverty, but poverty is hidden in Aberdeen, simply because when people think of Aberdeen or know of Aberdeen, it's about the wealth of Aberdeen. So, it's known as the oil capital of Europe. As I said previously, I had no idea how much poverty that there is in Aberdeen.
Aberdeen's always had this disparity between rich and poor. There's always been a kind of underclass, if you like, in Aberdeen. It's estimated that something like 10% of the population is untouched by the oil wealth of the city. Now, we can't solve the problems, the social problems and society's problems about poverty, but we can address the issues as they affect individual people and families, and that's what we've tried to do over the years.
The world we live in is ruled in effect by those who hold its wealth, by the large financial institutions, banks, and by huge multinational companies. And that means that the space that governments have to operate in to make their own societies, places where people want to live, is smaller than it used to be. My view is that we all have to be in rebellion against that, and that charities and the way in which charities approach the needs of our population is one way of rebelling, is to say, we have seen this. It's not just a statistic, it's human beings' lives that are being wasted, and we have to do something about it. And that may end up pushing people back in the direction of solutions that are not just individualistic, but communal and societal.
When we started out 30 years ago, we had no idea how long we would be in existence or how we would develop. And I suppose one of the sad things is that we're still in existence, because if things were different in society, we wouldn't be needed. And I suppose we've always been conscious of that any success we've had is a kind of muted success, because if things were different, we wouldn't be here, and we'd be delighted not to be here, because that would mean we weren't needed.
I think there will always be a role for Instant Neighbour, because there will always be individuals who will have crises in their life. And for the grace of God, you never know what's in front of you. And there will always be families with children who, for no reason of their own, go through a dramatic experience in their life. There will always be young people who will be homeless. And there is a need for charities, but they're not there to provide, to give, for what the state should be doing. It's a top-up, it's support, it's there to help, not instead of the government. I haven't got a problem saying there will always be a charity, or there always should be an instant neighbour, providing it's there to help for the little things and the things it's missing, but not there to provide what the state should be providing. We're going back to the Margaret Thatcher eras, and we're going back to John Major eras, because what charities are beginning to do now is provide what the state should be providing.
The future of Instant Neighbour. At the moment we're negotiating for additional premises at Great Western Road in the middle of the town to sell high-end, quality, tested white goods and electrical goods from there. And we feel that selling on electrical goods would be a great use and an additional arm to our arrow to our bow of things that we're actually doing. It will allow us to offer an additional full-time paid employment position plus a part-time and obviously some volunteer positions there as well. And part of the thing we realised some years ago was that whilst we were giving out food parcels, we weren't doing much more than that. So really it was a sticking plaster approach to helping people. It was an immediate piece of help rather than a long-term process. So Sean, along with another volunteer called Neil, have been in the process of working with people who come in for food parcels. They meet with them, they spend a bit of time getting to know them, getting to understand the issues they're facing. They offer them support in whatever way they can, which can be simply about making a phone call for them, referring them back to the job centre if there's something wrong, or finding other agencies that could help them to figure out why they might be not managing their money quite as well, or if there's some addiction issue to help them with that. But for the long-term future, our aim will remain to be alleviating poverty, the poverty of health, wealth and opportunity, and we will do that through all of the projects that we have at the moment, assuming they're still required, and we'll develop additional projects on the back of what is needed by our clients.